a huge military column with orders to South Ossetian rebels, who've long received Russian support. The Russian Air Force has also been in action today, bombing targets in both South Ossetia and in Georgia itself. Now, this huge crater, the Georgian authorities say, is the result of one of those bombing runs by Russian jets. Now, the point about this is it's something like 30 kilometers away from South Ossetia. In other words, the Russian military campaign has already extended deep into Georgian territory.
We will not allow our people to be killed like this. Those who are responsible will get the punishment they deserve.
But the Georgian forces are not listening to these warnings and are taking on the Russian forces, raising the prospect of all-out war between the two countries.
We are dealing with legal fiction here, and we are dealing with clear attempt to annex and appropriate even small part of other countries' territory. Doesn't Russia have enough territory of its own to try to chop off the territories of other smaller neighbors?
As refugees flee the conflict zone, the big question now is whether the Russian troops will try to push further south towards the Georgian capital.
The BBC's Richard Galpin there reporting from Georgia's border with South Ossetia. So what has made this obscure region such a flashpoint, and why did a dispute over a tiny territory trigger an urgent conversation in Beijing today between President Bush and Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin? The BBC's World Affairs editor Bridget Kendall fills in the background and the greater significance of this conflict.
You can read it on their faces. This Georgian standoff goes to the heart of a Russian-American battle for influence in a critical part of the world. And no sign that brief chat at the Olympics today brought hope of a way out. Tensions over South Ossetia's status have simmered for years, but this intervention by Georgian troops, matched by Russia's military response, marks a new and dangerous phase. On one level, it's a local dispute. Georgia wants to reassert control over its territory. But on another level, there's a far bigger power play. Russia sees the entire Caucasus as its backyard, a geostrategic crossroads between Asia and Europe it wants to keep in its grasp. Energy is the first battleground. Cuts in gas supplies and even a mysterious pipeline explosion in 2006 served to remind Georgians they had to rely on Russian fuel. But now Georgia hosts a new pipeline, pumping oil and gas via Turkey to world markets, bypassing Russia altogether. Security is the other point of tension. Following the Soviet Union's collapse in the early 90s, NATO's reach has extended slowly eastwards. Now Russia is worried that both Georgia and Ukraine might join, leaving it almost encircled. Moving into South Ossetia this week sends a shot across the bows, not just to Georgia, but to its allies in NATO as well.
Je donne la parole au représentant de la Fédération de Russie.
This evening, heated exchanges on the floor of the United Nations. From many countries, calls for a ceasefire, but no sign yet that either side is prepared to step back from the brink. Bridget Kendall, BBC News.
Well, for more on what's at stake in this dispute, I spoke earlier today with our North America correspondent Justin Webb from just outside the White House. Justin, Mr. Bush and Mr. Putin met in Beijing today, but this is a bit of a tricky one for the American president, isn't it?
It's hugely difficult for the Bush administration. They feel close to the Georgians. There is a real sense of wanting to protect and help a nation that the United States regards as a brave nation, a nation that is in very much the forefront of the democratic movement in Eastern Europe. On the other hand, there is also this sense that for all sorts of diplomatic reasons, it's important for the United States not to upset the Russians too much. Now, there are strategic concerns as well, of course. There is only one way of getting oil from the Caspian Sea to the west without going through Russia, and that is through a pipeline that goes through Georgia. So it's not all about principle, but there is this very tricky relationship now where the United States, and particularly the Bush administration that has been so close to the Georgian leadership, wants to do all it can to express support and actually in practice provide diplomatic support, but at the same time it has to respect boundaries. So you have a statement from Condoleezza Rice which calls for a ceasefire, calls on the Russians to ceasefire in particular, calls on the Russians to take their forces out of Georgia, to respect Georgian territorial integrity, and calls for international mediation. Interesting to see whether, if that gets nowhere as a diplomatic foray, what the Bush administration says next.
Justin Webb there at the White House, and let's get a quick look now from Simone.